People don't just vanish, or do they? Well, every year, thousands go missing, leaving behind nothing but questions, confusion, and heartbreak. While many cases are solved quickly, some remain mysteries for years, until the missing suddenly return, often with stories that sound too bizarre to be real. Some ran, some were taken, and some, even they don't know where they have been. From jaw-dropping escapes to eerie disappearances with no real answers, these are 15 cases of people who vanished, only to reappear years later in ways no one could have predicted. Number 15. Lucy Johnson. In 1961, Lucy Johnson vanished, leaving behind her husband and 2 young kids in British Columbia. Her husband didn't even report her missing for 4 years. Suspicious, right? Police assumed the worst. Did he kill her? Was she buried in the backyard? They even dug up the yard searching for remains, but found nothing. Then in 2013, 52 years later, her daughter placed a newspaper ad looking for answers. A woman in Yukon responded, "Lucy was alive." Turns out she had left on purpose to escape an abusive marriage. She started over, remarried, had more children, and built a new life, while her first kids grew up without answers. The reunion? Well, it was bittersweet. She reconnected with her daughter but had no regrets about leaving. Was she a survivor or a deserter? Depends on who you ask. But let's be real. How can someone do that? Number 14. Petra Padsitka. In 1984, 24-year-old German student Petra vanished. Her parents panicked. Police searched. No body, no clues. The case went cold, and by 1989, she was legally declared dead. Then, in 2015, more than 30 years later, Petra was found alive. Not kidnapped, not in hiding from danger. She just didn't want to be found. She had lived off the grid under a fake identity in Germany, avoiding modern life entirely. No bank account, no passport, no digital footprint. She built a life where she didn't exist on paper. When police finally tracked her down over a minor legal issue, she refused to reunite with her family. She had walked away on purpose, and she was staying gone. Her case shattered the idea that every missing person is a victim. Some people don't disappear by accident. They vanish because they want to. And Petra? She never explained why. Number 13. Tanya Koch. At 14, Tanya thought she had found someone who understood her. Thomas Jose, the school security guard, seemed kind, attentive, even protective. But predators don't wear fangs. They wear trust like a disguise. One day, she left home and never returned. For 10 years, Tanya lived trapped in his house, stripped of her name, her choices, and her childhood. He called her Nikki Allen. She wasn't allowed outside, not even to school. Jose brainwashed her, made her believe her family didn't want her, that this life was the best she'd get. She documented her own abuse in journals, at his command. But control always cracks. In the early 2000s, she was granted tiny freedoms, enough to work part-time at a local deli. That's where she met Joe Sparrow, a man who really listened. One quiet plea for help, and in 2004, she was free. Jose was arrested. Number 12, Dr. William Bates. Dr. William Bates was a respected New York ophthalmologist, known for his work in eye care. Then, one day in 1902, he just disappeared. His wife was out of town. He left a hurried letter saying he needed a break from work, then vanished off the face of the earth. Months passed, then years. Everyone assumed the worst. Murder? Suicide? A nervous breakdown? Then, out of nowhere, he was found. In London. He was working as a doctor at Charing Cross Hospital, totally unaware of his past life. He didn't remember New York, his career, even his cute wife. Nothing. Even when confronted with the truth, the memories never come back. He chose to stay in London, never returning to his old identity. Was it a rare dissociative fugue state? A deliberate escape? Well, no one knows. But Dr. Bates's story is proof that sometimes people don't just disappear physically, they vanish from their own minds. So don't take too much stress in life. Number 11. Jacqueline Crackman and Melvin Uphoff. In 1965, Jacqueline Crackman told her family she was going to a wedding. A month later, Melvin Uphoff stepped out to buy beer. Neither of them ever came back. At first, it seemed like two separate disappearances. A young mom leaving behind two kids, and a married man vanishing into thin air. But their small Nebraska town wasn't buying it. Rumors spread like wildfire in Los Angeles. They'd run off together. They'd faked their deaths. They were in some secret crime ring. Decades passed. Their children grew up with no answers, just an empty space where a parent should have been. Then, in 2009, 44 years later, authorities finally tracked them down. Jacqueline and Melvin had, in fact, disappeared together to start a new life. No crimes, no foul play, just a pair of lovers who walked away without looking back. Their kids? Well, not exactly thrilled. Love story or selfish escape? What do you say about this childrenless relationship? Number 10. Paul Fronczak. In 1964, an infant named Paul Fronczak was stolen from a Chicago hospital by a woman dressed as a nurse. Gone without a trace. 2 years later, a toddler abandoned in New Jersey was believed to be Paul. The Fronczak family took him in, raising him with love. But something never felt right. As an adult, Paul took a DNA test in 2012, and his world imploded. He wasn't their biological child. So, who was he? The investigation led him to his real identity, Jack Rosenthal, and an even bigger shock. He had a missing twin sister, Jill. Meanwhile, the real Paul Fronczak was eventually identified as Kevin Ray Beatty, but tragically, he died before reuniting with his birth family. Paul's story is one of mistaken identities, lost siblings, and stolen lives. He went looking for answers and ended up uncovering one of the strangest missing person cases ever, one that left more questions than it answered. Now, let's talk about Number 9. Edgar Latulip. At 21 years old, Edgar Latulip disappeared from Ontario, leaving behind a devastated family. He had developmental disabilities and the mental capacity of a 12-year-old, making his sudden disappearance even more concerning. For 30 years, everyone assumed he had died. His mother mourned. Police searched. Nothing. Then, in 2016, Edgar started having strange flashes of memory, like pieces of a puzzle suddenly coming together. He searched online, found a missing persons report that looked eerily familiar, and got a DNA test. Boom. Edgar Latulip had been alive this entire time. After suffering a head injury shortly after disappearing, he lost all memory of who he was. He built a new life, unaware of his real identity, until the day his mind finally gave him back his past. His reunion with his mother was emotional, shocking, and heartbreaking. For decades, she thought he was gone, only for him to return as a stranger. Number 8. Benjamin Kyle. In 2004, a Burger King employee in Georgia found a naked man behind a dumpster, covered in fire ant bites. He was disoriented, injured, and had no clue who he was. The man, who called himself Benjamin Kyle, was diagnosed with dissociative amnesia. No ID, no past, no idea how he got there. He was a ghost. For years, Benjamin lived in shelters, unable to work because he had no legal identity. He scoured missing person databases, searching for a face he recognized. Nothing. Then, in 2015, forensic genealogists finally cracked the case. His real name? William Burgess Powell. He had grown up in Indiana but had been missing for over 30 years. But even with his name restored, he still had no memory of his past. No one knows why he disappeared, what happened during those missing decades, or why his mind erased itself. He got his name back. His memories, still missing. Number 7. Natasha Ryan. In 1998, Natasha Ryan, 14, vanished from her home in Australia. The world assumed the worst. Her disappearance matched the MO of a local serial killer, and when he went to trial, authorities charged him with her murder. Only one problem. Natasha wasn't dead. For 5 years, she lived hidden in her 22-year-old boyfriend's house, a cramped, suffocating existence where she rarely left the walls. Her parents grieved, the media covered her death, and an innocent man almost faced extra charges because of her disappearance. Then came the twist. In 2003, an anonymous tip led police straight to Natasha, alive, curled up in a wardrobe. The world lost its mind. Her reasoning? Teenage rebellion, fear, love, who knows? Some saw a victim of control, others saw a selfish runaway. Either way, she re-entered the world not as a murder case, but as one of the most bizarre missing person stories ever. Number 6. Carlos Sanchez. In 1995, Dr. Carlos Sanchez had everything: a respected career in Seville, Spain, a family, a normal life. Then, he walked away from it all. Gone. No goodbye, no explanation. His family was devastated. Authorities searched, but with 0 leads, he was eventually declared dead. His parents grieved. His name faded into memory. Fast forward 20 years, 2 mushroom pickers stumbled upon a disheveled man in an Italian forest. He introduced himself. "I'm Carlos. I've lived here for 20 years." He had abandoned society, choosing a life of solitude, surviving off the land, speaking to no one. When authorities contacted his family, he refused to reunite. His reason? He never gave one. Carlos Sanchez's story is eerie, poetic, and unsettling. He didn't just disappear, he erased himself from the world. And when found, he simply slipped back into the wilderness. Number 5. Stephen Kubacki. In 1978, Stephen Kubacki went skiing near Lake Michigan and simply vanished. No dramatic struggle, no sign of foul play, just an abandoned backpack and a clean trail of ski prints that ended abruptly at the frozen shore. Authorities scoured the area, but with nothing to go on, they assumed the worst. He must have fallen through the ice and drowned. Then, 15 months later, Stephen reappeared, 700 miles away in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, with no idea where he had been. He was wearing unfamiliar clothes, carrying a backpack stuffed with strange maps, and had 0 memory of the missing time. People went wild with theories. A dissociative fugue? Time travel? Kubacki himself has stayed quiet, dodging speculation and publishing a philosophy book instead of answers. Even today, his disappearance remains one of the strangest on record. No crime, no explanation, just a man who vanished and walked back into existence like nothing had happened. Number 4. Julian Hernandez. Julian Hernandez had a normal life, or so he thought. He was a straight-A student in Ohio, planning for college, filling out applications, when something weird happened. His social security number didn't match his name. Confused, he dug deeper. What he found shattered his entire existence. He had been missing since he was 5 years old. Back in 2002, his father, Bobby Hernandez, had kidnapped him, violating a custody agreement. He had changed Julian's name, relocated, and raised him under false identities, living a totally quiet life off the radar. When the truth came out in 2015, Bobby was arrested. The media went wild. But Julian? He didn't see himself as a victim. His father, despite his crime, had been a good parent. He even pleaded for Bobby to get a light sentence. It wasn't black and white. It was love, deception, and a life built on a lie. Number 3. Steve Carter. Steve Carter always knew something felt off about his past. Adopted as a baby in Hawaii, he had lingering questions. His birth certificate was weird, and his adoption paperwork didn't quite add up. In 2011, curiosity led him to a missing persons website. There, staring back at him, was a digitally aged photo of a missing child who looked exactly like him. Turns out, he was that missing child. His real name? Marks Panama Barnes. His biological mother had abducted him as a baby, fed authorities fake information, and vanished. Meanwhile, his father had spent decades searching for the son he lost. One DNA test later, Steve uncovered a past he never knew existed. His mother? Never found. His father? Overjoyed to reunite. His story wasn't about getting lost. It was about a life stolen and the incredible moment when he put the pieces back together himself. Number 2. J.C. Dugard. 1991. J.C. Dugard, 11 years old, was walking to the school bus when a car pulled up beside her. She never made it to class. For nearly 2 decades, J.C. lived in a makeshift prison, a soundproof shed in the backyard of Philip and Nancy Garrido. She endured horrors no child should ever face, gave birth to 2 daughters in captivity, and lost her identity to fear and control. Her family never stopped looking. They put her face on billboards and pleaded with the world for answers. But J.C.? She was just trying to survive, raising her children in an artificial world built by a monster. Then, in 2009, Garrido messed up. He brought J.C. and her daughters to a university campus, and his erratic behavior raised alarms. A background check, a little digging, and suddenly, after 18 years, J.C. was free. The world watched in awe as the lost girl returned, not just alive, but ready to fight back. Today, she's an advocate, author, and living proof that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about reclaiming your story. Number 1. John Darwin. In 2002, John Darwin paddled his canoe into the sea and never came back. At least that's what everyone thought. His wife Anne played the grieving widow perfectly, collecting $680,000 in life insurance and keeping up the tragic charade. Their sons mourned their dead father. The world moved on. But John wasn't dead. He was hiding next door. For 5 years, he lived in a secret passageway between 2 properties, sneaking around like some budget spy. Then, in 2007, he got cocky. He waltzed into a police station, claiming he had amnesia. Seemed like a genius move, until investigators found vacation photos of him and Anne in Panama, living it up while their kids thought he was gone forever. Both were arrested, and their fraud was exposed. John served 6 years in prison. Anne got out earlier, claiming she was manipulated. Their sons, furious. 1 faked death, 1 massive scam, and 0 regrets from John. The man still insists he outsmarted the system. If you have found this video interesting, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.